I think this is the first time that I've seen Micah Parsons struggle all season long. The way that they came in with the plan of the attack, Nick Sirianni, the whole entire staff really drew that up well.
And, Eddie Kratz said, it might be playing a complete game all 4 quarters. Let's pop on our next guest, Kayla Santiago from JAKIB Sports, and see what her concerns are heading into the bye week here on the Football Playbook like she does each and every Wednesday. Kayla, good morning. How are you today? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm feeling good. 6-0, not the best win in the world, but hey, a win is a win. And it looks like the city of Philadelphia right now is all hopping on board with the win. So it has been very fun to watch it all go down and happen.
I'll tell you, it's the hunt for Red October. What a great time. I know you've got your finger on the pulse with all the Philadelphia teams, so I know you're enjoying your fandom moment.
Absolutely. You got the Phillies, Flyers won last night. Sixers, it was game 1. It's okay. I'll give them a pass. But, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles 6-0, the only undefeated team left in the NFL.
Yeah, it's on fire. It's lit, as A.J. Brown said. Philadelphia is lit right now. And let's talk about the Cowboys game first. The link was rocking, and man, what a ultimate scene for the Eagles to just go in there, set a statement early. But I just alluded it to the 4 quarters of football right before you came on here. There's something going on in the second quarter because they score all these points, and there's something going on in the second half because they're averaging 21 points in the first half, just 5.8 points in the second half. What exactly is the biggest concern coming into the bye week? Is it playing complete football? Is it the special teams? What left a bad taste in your mouth coming out of that Cowboys game?
I mean, I think it's playing complete football for sure. You can look at the special teams, absolutely, but we've been saying this narrative since week 1 of they don't play second half of football, and they haven't played a second half of a football game yet this year, in my opinion. With that being said, I think they'll be fine, quote unquote, getting by because the NFC conference, in my personal opinion, is just not as competitive as you look at the AFC. But when you want to get into the playoffs, that's just not going to pass. That's going to be a completely different thing. If they're able to get there, depending on if they're able to get by for that first round of the playoffs, it definitely worries me. And I think that's something that they need to figure out, whether it's stamina, whether it's just them kind of resting on their laurels with that lead, because that might get you by through the first 6 weeks. But you look at the rest of the season, and there's games with this division right now, the NFC East, that might be must-win games. You look at the Giants coming up in just a few weeks. That's a game that if you fall, you might possibly fall to second in the division, as crazy as that sounds. But the NFC East is pretty good this year. So I think that's the biggest concern for me going into the bye week. And they definitely have to shape that up a little bit because I don't think that's going to pass for the rest of the season, definitely not in the postseason.
The NFC beasts all of a sudden, right? I mean, and I agree with you. I do think the contenders are in the AFC. Like if you were to set a betting line for the Bills or the Chiefs against the Eagles in a Super Bowl, I think the Bills or the Chiefs would probably be the favorite in that game. But when it comes to the NFC, the Eagles got to take care of business in their own backyard. Because don't look now, the Giants 5-1. We sit here every week and say, "Oh, they're not for real. They're not for real." Then they go out, they dismantle the Ravens, they beat the Packers. I mean, it's funny because like Carl Banks, who I respect a lot, good friend of the show, by the way, an all-time Giants legend. He said, it's really kind of like bonus football for the Giants because there were zero expectations. He said, This wasn't just a renovation. This wasn't just a rebuild. Like, this was a reconstruction of the entire organization. For them to be 5-1, they're playing with some bonus football. But I mentioned it yesterday, Kayla, like the Giants could go 5-6, play losing football the rest of the way, and still win double digits. So I think you could probably see, I think it's pretty realistic to think that 3 teams could be in the playoffs out of this NFC East.
Yeah, and it's never usually like that. And I think for the Eagles right now, you look at them and say, wow, they're 6-0. But when I saw the Giants beat the Ravens, I'm like, this is almost a must-win game for Philadelphia, especially going into the bye week, because if you lose against the Dallas Cowboys and the Giants win next week, well, there you go. The standings like that just in the NFC East are going to change. So you look at the Giants right now. Now the Ravens can't close out games for their life either. They've lost majority of their games in the last 2 minutes of football, which is absolutely crazy. But when you're talking about New York, a team that literally has nothing to lose, beating the Green Bay Packers and beating the Baltimore Ravens, yes, they're not the team everybody thought they were going to be this year right now, but those are still pretty big wins if you're looking at the New York Giants staff and players. So listen, I think that they're not going to keep this up, in my opinion, through the rest of the NFL regular season. But at the same time, this division is super competitive right now. Washington's obviously going to sit at that last spot, but there's a good chance if the Eagles can't finish out games and they have 1 or 2 losses that they could evidently drop to third in this division, which absolutely sounds crazy, but it's the truth.
Yeah, and they got to play the Giants still 2 more times to go. Obviously, Dallas, they got 1 down. They'll be going back to Dallas later in the season. I got to tell you, Kayla, when I look around the NFC, not that impressed with Tampa. You saw them lose to Pittsburgh. Not that impressed by Green Bay. They just got swept by Jersey, the Giants, and the Jets. With 49ers, we saw what the Falcons did to them this past week. I mean, I could state a case that the Dallas Cowboys are the second best team in the National Football League, and Cooper Rush looked like an incompetent quarterback to me. Dak Prescott's a huge upgrade. How much of a difference will that make when the Eagles see the Cowboys on the come around?
It's going to be completely different because you look at Dak Prescott and the point when the Eagles play the Cowboys, he's already going to have a few games back where he's able to work out those kinks, where he's able to go in there and really figure out what he needs to get right back to it. Now, I will say this. A lot of people are saying, the Eagles beat a backup quarterback with the Dallas Cowboys, but Cooper Rush was the talk of the town for a while when Dak left, and all of a sudden the Dallas Cowboys look phenomenal and Cooper Rush looks really good until he plays the Philadelphia Eagles, and now he's the backup quarterback. But with that being said, I think this team revolves around Dak Prescott. He's obviously the guy, and it's going to look completely different. And the Cowboys are going to come in there if the standings kind of shape up how we expect them to. The Cowboys are going to come in there and give it everything they got, and it won't be in Philadelphia. So that's also going to play into the factor of the Cowboys. You look at Dak Prescott coming out, he's going to want to beat Philly after his team lost to him earlier in the year.
Yeah, William Stark saying the delusional Dallas media, Dak wasn't doing anything special before the injury. But I would say, William, Dak can throw the ball downfield. And that's something that Cooper Rush really struggled with. And I think the big play factor is something that Dak Prescott brings to the equation. And they won't have to lean on the run game so much because Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, both got a lot of work in that game. I think they'll put the ball in Prescott's hands and try to make plays in the passing attack. And don't forget, Dalton Schultz was another guy who missed that game and will be back on the come around. Now, on the other end of the ball, I thought they had a great plan of attack to attack Micah Parsons. They ran at him. They left him unblocked at times. I think it caught him off guard. And, listen, when Lane Johnson went out, Parsons kind of got back into a groove somewhat. But when you look at the overall performance and the honing in on Micah Parsons, they said, hey, nobody's going to think about Micah Parsons in his life more than the Philadelphia Eagles are going to think about Micah this week. And it paid off. I mean, they did a very effective job, I thought. Not just with Micah Parsons, but with the entire pass rush. Like, they still had 4 sacks. They still got in there. I think there was a play where Sam Williams and DeMarcus Lawrence kind of crunched Hurts in the backfield, and he got up kind of, grabbing his chest. So they did get there in the backfield, but I thought they did a good job limiting the pass rush and Micah Parsons. What did you see?
I think this is the first time that I've seen Micah Parsons struggle all season long. The way that they came in with the plan of the attack, Nick Sirianni, the whole entire staff really drew that up well. And you look at this matchup and you say, yes, the defense as a whole, Micah Parsons as a whole, and maybe you want to fix things with Jalen Hurts or Miles Sanders. We mentioned last week handing the ball off a little bit more and a little bit quicker so Hurts doesn't get absolutely demolished. But obviously, their game plan was to make sure that offensive line was ready for battle, and that's exactly what they were able to do, and everything else fell into place. I also just think the game plan of Hurts getting the ball out of there quickly really, really worked throughout the game. But like I said, Micah Parsons doesn't struggle often, and I think this week he did against Philadelphia. And that's a good side when you're facing one of the best defensive players right now in the league.
No doubt about it. Talking to Kayla Santiago, Delmarva Sports, Philadelphia's finest, here on the Football Playbook like she does each and every Wednesday. And so, you mentioned Jalen Hurts, who didn't have his best game. You could say maybe it was his worst game. But overall, he left money on the table, but he was efficient once again. 155 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. I know 2 weeks ago it was the lack of passing touchdowns. This week he got the passing touchdowns, but there was a lack of passing yardage. I don't know. I just feel like at this point, Jalen Hurts is a franchise quarterback. Anybody, either you like the guy or you don't. If you don't like him, you're going to find a reason every week to nitpick some kind of element in his game. But I don't know. I saw, is it Dave? I always mix up Derek Carr and David Carr. I think Derek's the quarterback for the Raiders. David is the one on NFL Network. He came out with a poll or a list, top 15 offensive players in the National Football League. He's got Jalen Hurts at 8, ahead of guys like Aaron Rodgers, ahead of guys like, dare I say, Lamar Jackson. And a lot of the talk going into this season, Kayla, was like, hey, Lamar is going to reset the quarterback market. I don't know. Call me crazy. Like, I'm just forecasting now. I'm rubbing the crystal balls. I'm looking down the road. But I'm just saying, like, should Jalen Hurts lead his team to a Super Bowl, whether they win or not, if the Eagles go further than the Ravens in the playoffs, it might be Jalen Hurts who resets the market and not Lamar Jackson. Is that a crazy thought process, Kayla?
No, because in my opinion, if the season were to end today, you give Jalen Hurts the MVP of the league. I think that he has came out this year and absolutely surprised everybody. Going into this season, he's in year 2 as the year 2 starter fully. A lot of expectations are on him. He lives up to every single expectation. Did he have the best week statistically against the Dallas Cowboys? Absolutely not. But from a leader standpoint and the way that he was able to get the ball out and focus on the game plan, I think that was Jalen Hurts' best game because you give it to Miles Sanders quickly. You're not forcing yourself to run and absolutely get hurt. You understand the pressure that's coming in by Micah Parsons and that defensive line of the Dallas Cowboys. You're getting those little quick slam passes that need to happen in order for you to drive down the field. Were the passing yards there? No, but he did what he needed to do. And every single week, you have to adjust to the defense that you're going to face. And Cowboys have a very, very good defensive front, and he was able to adjust. And that has been the thing that I have really looked at Jalen Hurts and said, this dude is finding a way to win games each and every week. He's not focusing on what everybody else is saying. He's not coming in, and you're not seeing the same Jalen Hurts. You're seeing the same efficiency, but you're seeing him adjust to how the other team comes in and plays and being able to attack that way. He's unselfish. He doesn't care about the stats for himself. He's making sure that the team gets the win. And I think right now you're absolutely right. If he can lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson might be a talk of the past because Jalen Hurts can be that guy.
Sounds like a bold statement on the surface, right? Jalen Hurts is the MVP, but it's not that far-fetched. In fact, Ocean Casino Resorts now have him elevated as the number 2 favorite candidate behind Josh Allen in terms of the MVP race voting. So, hey, you can call us crazy. All you got to do is point to the results on the field, and Jalen Hurts is getting it done. Now, Kayla, I won't blame this on Jalen specifically, but my one pet peeve against the offense, and I didn't see it last week or this week, is they're not taking enough shots downfield for my liking, personally. And I remember, week 2, that Quez Watkins deep ball early on in the game. Like, to me, I heard Mark Skrouth talking on the Dolphins game, and he's done a couple Eagles games this year. He made a good point. Like, you game plan and you prepare for guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But when you get out on the field in real life time, the defense is taking a quarter to kind of adjust and say, wow, that's like some real speed. Quez Watkins is in that category. He's a 4.28 guy. Like, I don't care if you complete the ball or not. First quarter, I want at least one deep shot downfield, stretch the defense, take a shot, keep them honest, make them respect that. I haven't seen it in the last week or two.
I think the difference with the Eagles is there's just no game plan for Quez Watkins or even Devonta Smith right now, in my opinion. I think you look at the game plan right now, and Philadelphia says, well, you got A.J. Brown. If you hit him on a slam pass for 5 yards, he's going to go ahead and get you 15 yards and get you that first down. I agree. I would like to see more passes downfield. I would like to see that development a little bit more consistently in Jalen Hurts games. I don't think that they're using Devonta Smith quite effectively either, or Quez Watkins at all. But whatever they're doing is working, and that's the thing. I think right now they're focusing on that run game and on the A.J. Brown game because that's what's winning them games. But with that being said, they're not playing second half of football, right? So when you get into those situations where you're like the Ravens all of a sudden and you have to come back with 2 minutes left in the game, that deep ball can help you out. They haven't had to do that yet this year, but it's coming. It's not like they're going to escape it. It's not like they're going to be able to only play one half of football all year long and then be able just to go undefeated. Maybe they will. I don't know. But realistically, with how the NFL works, I don't think they will. So I think that's something they also kind of have to work on and putting a little bit more into the game plan, especially in that second half during this bye week, figuring out, okay, what plays can we draw for Watkins? How can we get him the ball? How can other guys just kind of be a decoy so that he throws defensive off guard, especially in the secondary? And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more shots down the field after this bye week.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like the targets really are slanted towards the big three, which is AJ, Devonta, and Dallas Goddard. And Quez Watkins only has like maybe 13 targets on the season. Like, I don't know. I'd like to try to get him more involved. I don't know if it's end arounds, reverses, or bubble screens or deep balls, but you'd like to see them utilize that speed a little bit more effectively. And one thing they did do effectively was run the ball. They ran the ball 39 times again. Big, long drive there in the second half to kind of salt the victory. But one thing Shane Steichen mentioned yesterday in his press conference was getting Gainwell and Boston Scott involved earlier on in the game plan rather than waiting. And we saw it early. We saw it often. It was a running back by committee. Miles Sanders had that one big game a few weeks back with 27 carries, but for the most part, they've been keeping him in that 15, 17, 18 ballpark range. Do you like what you see from this committee by backfield? Are you comfortable with the trade deadline right around the corner, running the table with this trio?
It's tough because you look at Boston Scott, who already had an injury this year, and you say, okay, well, do you want to get another guy in the backfield in? Do you want a situation where, Boston Scott or Kenny Gainwell get injured and Miles Sanders is taking a lot of snaps knowing his injury history? But I will say that I feel confident in this running back room. I think no matter what, in every single game, that Miles Sanders is your guy, whether that's splitting up the snaps between the three of them or a game where Miles Sanders has to take majority of the snaps. He's another guy who can adjust very, very well. You look at Kenny Gainwell, you look at Boston Scott, they're going to get you those extra yards. But there's going to be games where those guys aren't going to get as many touches just based on the matchups and what Miles Sanders is able to do and able to create. He also takes pressure off Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts doesn't have to go kill himself and try to get that first down and put his body on the line if you have a guy like Miles Sanders. So I think this running back room is very intact. I think you worry about injuries, but knock on wood, Miles Sanders has looked very good, and he hasn't sat out. So I think that's a good sign for Philadelphia, especially with the bye week. They can rest their bodies, and I think they're going to come out firing when they get back after the bye.
Yeah, it all starts up front, and you mentioned the bye week. A lot of these offensive linemen are looking to get right, get tight, get healthy during this bye week. I know some of the players are heading home on the bye week. We had Eddie Kratz from Eagles today. Earlier in the show, he said the offensive linemen are probably staying grounded. You got Kelsey with the ankle, Malata with the shoulder in a sling. Sayamalu's all banged up as well with the ankle. Dillard has been activated now from the injured reserve spot, and we might see him against Pittsburgh. What is Lane Johnson? Concussion protocol, his third concussion in 5 years, Kayla. To me, that is the biggest kind of storyline here entering the bye week. And we know the mental health issues he's had in the past. He's a little bit of an older player. Eddie Kratz said he was maybe contemplating retirement after this season. How significant is this concussion here for Lane Johnson?
It's really, really significant if he's not able to come back, because he is such a big piece of this offensive line. And you can just see it as soon as he's not able to be in there, there definitely is a drop off. Now, with that being said, you have to worry about the concussions, because you look at what happened to Tua, right? Luckily, it looks like Tua is going to be back this week, or is going to come back this season. But this is not something you mess with, right? 3 concussions in a short amount of time. The mental toll that it takes on them. We've seen everything about CTE, and we've seen what it can really do to them. These guys are also fathers. They're also husbands. They also have a life outside of football. So you don't want to deter them for the rest of their life. But with that being said, I think the medical staff, at least for Philadelphia, is going to do what they need to do to make sure that he's actually okay to come back. And with Lane Johnson kind of being shaken up, one hit, unfortunately, to the helmet might be it. And I don't want to say that, and that sounds awful. But with that being said, you have to see the other guys that you have back there. And I think without Lane Johnson, it definitely worries me a little bit. You look at Jordan Mailata too, who honestly is just such a good story after him playing rugby and then, coming up and being able to have such a big impact. And Jason Kelce, I mean, this guy is the rock of Philadelphia, in my opinion, because he each and every season contemplates retiring as well. Like Lane Johnson comes in, is just so effective. But going back to your point, I mean, I think if they don't have them, you as Philadelphia have to worry, just because Lane Johnson has been so effective, and you need protection with a guy who likes to scramble in the pocket and the running backs that you have.
Yeah, I did my top 5 most valuable offensive and defensive players on the show yesterday, and 3 of the guys you just mentioned appeared on my offensive list. And it's rare. Like if I were to do that for every team around the National Football League, it'd be rare if you said, hey, who are the top 5 most valuable players on offense? The Eagles, to me, 3 of them were on the offensive line. Hurts, obviously, you said it, is the MVP of the entire league, never mind the Eagles. But after that, 2, 3, and 4, it was Kelce, Mailata, and Lane Johnson in terms of your most valuable Philadelphia Eagles. And it is the strength of this team. This team is going to go as far as the offensive line carries them. And I saw a comment, New Jersey Fishing Maniac. I tend to disagree. 3 concussions in 3 weeks for Tua, 3 concussions in 5 years, not bad for Lane Johnson. You can't just put concussions in a box like that. Every case is different. And the severity and the significance of each hit is different. So I get it. Tua, don't get me wrong, Tua's looked much scarier. But when you're talking about head trauma, hits to the head, violent collisions, this is not something to mess around with. And I do think Lane Johnson probably has a little bit greater conscience as a veteran guy who's been through concussions and injuries before. I would think with 2 weeks off, it's going to be weighing on his mind. And you got to be concerned about that if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, we saw the Steelers looking ahead now beat up on the Bucs. Kenny Pickett, their rookie quarterback, another guy in the concussion protocol, Kayla. So we don't know if we'll see Kenny Pickett, the Jersey Shore gunslinger, or Mitchell Trubisky in about 10 days or so when the Eagles meet the Pittsburgh Steelers. Eddie Kratz was under the impression that it really doesn't matter, but I would bet the Tampa Bay Buccaneers said the same thing coming into this past game, and they went down to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Gut feeling, will we see Pickett, Trubisky? Doesn't matter in your opinion, and should we not be sleeping on these Steelers after the big win over the Bucs?
Listen, I think it definitely matters. You're talking about the Steelers going in and beating Tom Brady. Listen, I know Tom Brady this year is not the Tom Brady that we've seen. There's a lot of stuff going on in his personal life, and the Bucks at this point right now are falling apart. But you can't sleep on any team in the National Football League. You could have said a few weeks ago people were sleeping on the New York Giants, and they went ahead and beat the Packers and the Ravens. You can't. You cannot. I hope it's not Mitchell Trubisky. I'd rather it be Kenny Pickett just because I love watching Kenny Pickett looking from an NFL perspective. But I think the Steelers, they're another team, didn't have a lot of high expectations this year, and they're going to go all out there, and they're not going to worry about, well, we have to win this game to get in the playoffs. They're going to put everything they need to into a game. And those sometimes are the scariest teams because you look at that game and it's like, this is a team that literally has nothing to lose at this point. So they're not going in overthinking things. They're just going to go out there and ball out. And I don't think you can overlook any team in the NFL, maybe the Denver Broncos, but any other team I don't really know about. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Steelers, they're going to look and they're going to look at this win and say, it's a long season. There's still games to be won, and there's still times to go out there and maybe make a push. You never know what can happen. You never know what's going to happen with other teams. So I think if you're the Steelers, it's on the up and up for them after being Tampa Bay.
Kayla throwing a little dig into Russell Wilson. Just, twist and turn while you're stabbing him. Why don't you? We're talking football here with Kayla Santiago. I got to ask you about the special teams, Kayla, because to me, I put a big emphasis on special teams. I do personally from just a football traditionalist, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. And the Eagles have struggled on punt coverage units. They've struggled on kick return coverage. We saw Turpin with the big kick return, 65 yards. He also had a big punt return. Thankfully, it was called back due to holding. But Britton Covey, he's had some muffs, hasn't really been a big-time explosive return guy. Michael Clay spoke to the media yesterday, somewhat on the hot seat. Deshaun Jackson signed with the Ravens yesterday. I would have liked the Eagles to maybe kick the tires there. Where are you in terms of special teams, both on the return game and the coverage units?
I think you look at special teams, and special teams can win games. They can win games or they can lose games for you. And I think people need to put more of an emphasis on special teams. I was very disappointed when I saw Deshaun Jackson go to the Ravens. Not because he's my favorite Eagle ever to play, and I have 8 jerseys in my closet of Deshaun Jackson in Philadelphia, but because it's the same thing we talked about with OBJ, right? Deshaun Jackson can come in, and all you need him to do is return punts. He doesn't have the same speed he might have had 5-6 years ago, but he's still efficient. He can still do that, and you can count on a guy like that. So when I saw the Ravens get him, in my mind, you say, did the Eagles even try? Is this a situation where maybe they have a guy in the back of their mind that they know they either want to get or somebody that they can coach up? Is everything situated? Or is this something to wave our flags and say, we're a little bit worried right now because you don't even try to go out and get Deshaun Jackson when you know you're struggling in that special teams area? Definitely raises some concern for me personally, but I think that they need to put emphasis on that in a bye week more than anything else, because once again, when you play a team like the Giants, that happens, you might lose that game just based off special teams play. And that can easily happen. You saw the Giants go wire to wire with the Ravens. They're not going to give up. They're going to bring you pressure. They're going to put the pressure on, especially when you're trying to catch that punt and get some yardage and making sure you're not going backwards. So special teams will win or lose games. And if the Eagles aren't careful and they don't make adjustments, it's not going to be good, especially against games like the Cowboys and the Giants going forward.
Yeah, it was interesting. I thought, Deshaun Jackson, he actually called out the Eagles on the podcast and said, hey, I want to play for the Eagles. You would think Howie would have got him on the phone, but there he was in Baltimore yesterday, and they didn't waste any time signing D-Jax. So he's back at it again. Kayla's back at it again on the Football Playbook. Last one for you, Kayla. We talked about the running back situation. The NFL trade deadline is November 1st. A lot of defensive ends being rumored available on the trade block. Guys like Brian Burns at Carolina, Robert Quinn in Chicago, Jerry Hughes, who's now down there in Houston. would you like to see the Eagles explore a trade for defensive end or any position? Jabril Peppers is a safety that's also been rumored to be on the trade block. And I know Avonte Maddox has been banged up. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did play nickel corner for the Saints. Maybe you bring in a safety and slide Chauncey over to nickelback. I don't know. Do you want to see the Eagles tinker with this roster as the bye week and the trade deadline approach us?
I don't think I would be mad if they didn't, but I think the biggest piece that they can add is somebody in their secondary, because we've already seen them be banged up. They played a really, really exciting game last week. I'm not going to lie. Looking at James Bradbury, looking at CJ, looking at Darius Slay, all these guys just got me out of my seat. I think like every single second they were on defense. I really like the thought of Jabril Peppers for sure coming in as that guy. Avonte Maddox, once again, banged up just a little bit here. And I think right now the one thing that you haven't had in years, and I said this in the beginning of the season, is a really, really good secondary that you can rely on. And I think that's what the Eagles have this year. Now, defensive ends, I also like looking at that. But if you're talking about one guy, one position, one unit in the defensive side of the ball that you want to bring in, I think it's secondary just because of the injuries and just so you have the depth that you have on the defensive line in that linebacker position. This is a complete team right now, maybe besides special teams. But if you want to make a long run, everything is different in the playoffs. I know the NFC is not as competitive this year, but as soon as you get into playoffs, everything is different. You want depth. You want to make sure guys are ready to roll. And getting another piece out of that secondary, I think, could be the way to go. But like I said, if they don't get anybody, I'm not going to be like fire Howie Roseman. I think they have a very good team right now and guys that they can really monitor up to be that next man up mentality. But another player in the secondary wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, the secondary has been dependable, and you've been reliable each and every week, bringing the heat here on the Football Playbook with your Eagles analysis. We covered a lot of ground here today. Anything else you want to get off your chest here, Kayla, until we talk to you next week?
Listen, I'm just going to say people need to stop underlooking the Eagles with the whole they haven't played anybody yet, because they haven't played anybody until they played them and beat them, and all of a sudden you have a backup quarterback. They're not a good team. The Cowboys aren't at full strength. I don't want to hear it. Listen, I get they're not playing the Bills or the Chiefs or the Ravens. They're winning. They're winning football games, and they're winning each and every week. They're getting better each and every week. Jalen Hurts is showing a little glimpse of something new every single week. So don't sleep on the Philadelphia Eagles. Don't sleep on the city of Philadelphia. It might be a baseball town for a little bit. Who knows? The Eagles are undefeated, and everybody's eyes are going to Citizens Bank Park. So it's absolutely amazing to be a part of. Love coming on each and every week and talking birds. And I'm going to be sad when they don't play on Sunday, honestly. I'm going to be like, what do I do? Maybe the Phillies have a game 5. Maybe they don't. Maybe they sweep. Who knows? Not predicting anything here. But when the Eagles don't play on Sunday, I'm kind of going to be like, well, now I have to watch teams that have lost in the NFL. So I guess that's something to say.
Absolutely. We won't have a victory to talk about when you come back next week, but it's always a W when Kayla Santiago joins the Football Playbook, as far as I'm concerned. Kayla, thank you so much for all the hard work, preparation, and time you put in each and every week. We'll catch you next week, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.